Now, some of you may think that my decision to leave D&D 5e behind and transition to Pathfinder 2nd Edition is a knee-jerk reaction to what Wizards of the Coast tried to do a few months ago regarding the open gaming license. However, that was only the straw that broke the camel's back. So today, I'm going to talk about some of the shortcomings of D&D 5th Edition, the strengths of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and why I'm personally switching. You see, I've been considering a new system to run for my in-person RPG group for some time now. This is the group that I ran my Sword Coast Guard and Curse of Strahd campaigns for, and that you can watch right here on my channel every couple weeks. Those videos come out on Sundays usually. One of the reasons that I was searching for a new system was that I was bored with D&D 5th Edition. I'd been playing it since 2013, nearly 10 years, and I was ready for something different. Not only was I reading about different systems to inform this decision, but at the same time, I also happened to order the Pathfinder 2nd Edition core rulebook. We had just finished our Layers and Legends Kickstarter, and I was evaluating a new printer because I wasn't satisfied with the printer we used for Into the Fae. And the new printer happened to be the same one that prints like all of Paizo's books. So I ordered the Pathfinder 2 core rulebook so that I could evaluate the quality of the printing, which is spectacular, by the way, and especially when compared to the cheaply printed books that Wizards of the Coast make. However, I also started reading the book and I liked what I saw. And this was back in August and September of 2022. And I pulled the trigger on running Pathfinder 2nd Edition for my next campaign somewhere around that time. Like, you can ask my players, they will confirm. So that's the origin story of this all. And now I'd like to talk specifically about the shortcomings of D&D 5th Edition and what I love about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And please, bear in mind, this is from the perspective of someone who has played various editions of D&D for decades and is just getting into Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Number 1, game balance. Any game master who has played D&D 5th Edition for any length of time knows that the challenge rating system is completely borked and mostly useless, and it gets worse with every slightly more powerful character option that Wizards of the Coast releases. This is an ever-present problem for game masters, especially new game masters, and it annoys me to no end. So, one of the things that I loved about Pathfinder 2nd Edition, as I read more about it and hear what other people have to say, is that the mechanics for balancing encounters between PCs and monsters seems to be much better designed. And dare we say it, actually mostly works. So this was deeply appealing to me, and I think this is a massive advantage for any new game master who is looking to get into the hobby. Instead of being frustrated when the party curb stomps monsters that should have been challenging, or nearly TPKs to monsters who were supposedly going to be easy, you can actually feel more confident about the actual difficulties of the encounters you plan, instead of just guessing and hoping and living on a prayer. Number 2, high-level play actually exists. Something that is really exciting for most players and game masters is advancing through the levels, unlocking cool new abilities, spells, powers, magic items, and for game masters, unlocking new awesome monsters that you can use against your players' characters. However, D&D 5th Edition is plagued with so many issues at high levels that it's nearly unplayable. To name but a couple, game balance gets even worse, and combats can take hours. Holy crap, run like a level 18 or 20 combat. Tell me that it doesn't take 2 to 3 to 4 hours. It can get really crazy. And this is from a game master who doesn't let my players take forever to make up their minds on what to do, and I'm like, come on guys, let's go, 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 go. Can't imagine groups where players take 15 minutes to make up their minds. That would be insane. And anyway, what's worse, it's almost like Wizards of the Coast knows this. Look at their official modules. How many of them go past level 12 or 15? Like 1 or 2 maybe? Maybe? So when I heard that high-level play was actually a thing in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, that is, the game design supported it and mechanically it was feasible, well, that was super exciting. Not only do I, as the game master, want to be able to play the game at high levels, but I know that my players do as well. Number 3, I'm tired of the cheese in D&D 5th Edition. As a game master, I cannot express how tired I am of the cheesy bullcrap in D&D 5th Edition. Character splashes that just go for the low-hanging fruit in classes where so many good features are front-loaded. The wizard who splashes 1 level of cleric so that he can wear heavy armor. The paladin who splashes 2 levels of warlock and 2 levels of sorcerer for the awesome early benefits of those classes. And then there are the more and more increasingly broken character builds out there, thanks in no small part to increasingly more powerful character options that Wizards of the Coast releases. Now, you could might just say, Luke, why don't you just not allow your players to do those things? And that's fair, but my response is this: why don't we just use a game system that is better designed instead? It is far easier to have the rules of the game system place boundaries on gameplay rather than have to do it yourself as the game master. And anyone who has been a game master and has had to have those conversations, sometimes difficult ones with their players, knows exactly what I'm talking about. When you have to tell them that, yes, I recognize that ability and stuff is in the rule books and that you can legally do it, but I am choosing to say that it is not allowed for these reasons, that is not an easy conversation to have. Some players will get very upset with you very quickly and make your life as a game master exceedingly difficult. It's just so much better if the core rules address those concerns for the game master, because it makes the game master's job easier. Number 4, better character customization options. You see, as much as I don't like the cheese of D&D 5th edition, I still want my players to be able to create cool characters that they will have tons of fun playing. And D&D 5th edition is limiting in that regard. How many flavors of a paladin can you create that are all actually about the same power level? Or is there one build that is far superior? Same for the warlock. If you go pure warlock, there's only one build that's somewhat viable in my opinion, the bladelock. Like, why do you think nobody just does pure warlock? Why do you think warlock is only a splash? Because if you go pure warlock, you have a really crappy build and it's not yeesh. Anyway, the fact is that in D&D 5th edition, although players can create a variety of different character builds, there are clearly superior and inferior options. This serves as a de facto constraint on many players and leaves a lot to be desired. So, imagine my delight when I began to learn that in Pathfinder 2nd edition, the classes and feats and spells and abilities and all that cool stuff were mostly balanced, and that a player could create a cool character concept without having to worry that it would lag way behind in power and usefulness compared to other characters. Now, sure, Pathfinder 2nd edition isn't perfect, but dang, it sure seems light years better than D&D 5th edition in this regard. Furthermore, Pathfinder 2nd edition offers so many different options for customizing characters, class options, feats for ancestry and language, feats for your class, feats for your archetypes, and more. And you may say, well, D&D 5th edition has that too, right? And yes, it does, but you have no idea how many more Pathfinder 2nd edition has, and how many more options for customizing your character and creating something unique there actually are. You could probably create almost any sort of character concept you have in mind and still have it be viable in the game. This is something that places Pathfinder 2nd edition way ahead of the curve for players, and it is really, really cool. Number 5, Pathfinder 2nd edition monsters are better. Something that annoys me about D&D 5e monsters is that they tend to be rather bland. I mean, they have hit points and do damage and maybe have a special ability. Yeah. Some of them can cast spells, but then you have Counterspell, which puts a real dampener on that. This is a reason that I have been predominantly using Kobold Press monsters for quite some time now. They are just so much better than what Wizards of the Coast creates. However, a quick tour of Pathfinder 2nd edition monsters shows us that many of the monsters have special abilities that make combat so much more interesting. Take a look at Giants, a classic monster that D&D 5e has turned into big sacks of hit points that just do damage. How exciting. In Pathfinder 2nd edition, they're so much better. The Fire Giant, for instance, has a flaming stroke ability that lets it imbue its sword with fire and then attack each creature in a 15-foot straight line. The Cloud Giant has a wind strike that allows it to surround its polearm with a roar of rushing air that both damages and deafens a target. Number 6, combat is better. About a year ago, my friend Ed Robinson, who is also the lead developer of our publications, came out to where I live to run a one-shot for me and my in-person RPG group. I was playing an archer of some sort, and I remember thinking how boring combat was. I'd pop out from behind a corner, shoot 2 arrows, and then duck back around the corner. And that was pretty much what I did in every single combat, every single encounter. It was so bad. I started talking with my publication team about putting out some sort of resource that would help D&D 5e groups improve combat. Well, it seems like the Pathfinder 2nd Edition designers were thinking the same thing, because there are far better options for tactical combat in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. I'm still learning what they all are myself, but what I can see thus far is very encouraging. Number 7, Pathfinder 2e is more challenging. Now, I've talked quite a bit on my channel about the idea that a victory easily won is no victory at all. Instead, when the group finally beats a boss after a really tough challenge, well, that's when the whole table cheers and breathes a sigh of relief. And this is one of my gripes about D&D 5th edition. As a game system, it's just too easy. The characters are designed to be superheroes that can rarely be beaten, and death is rarely a threat. Characters dropping to 0 hit points and then jumping right back up as though nothing had happened are a common occurrence. So when I started hearing about Pathfinder 2e being a more challenging game to play, that really had me excited. And then when I played Pathfinder 2e for the first time and the entire party nearly wiped to a gelatinous cube, well, that was amazing. This may not be everyone's cup of tea, of course, but for me personally, after having played D&D 5e for a decade, this was a breath of fresh air and so very cool. Number 8, the rules are more robust. D&D 5e is hailed as rules light and easy to pick up and learn and play. And that can be a good thing. But what I discovered is that there are tons of situations that come up all the time that the rules just don't address. So the game master must make a house ruling and then keep track of it. Make another house ruling and keep track of it, and house ruling and keep track of them all. Or just have extreme inconsistency in your rules because you can't remember all your house rules. Or you write them all down in a notebook and a binder and keep track of it all, and woo! Anyway, I've often wondered, if these are common situations, wouldn't it just make more sense to have made rules out of the box to address them? Why instead rely on the game master to make house rulings? Well, it seems like the Pathfinder 2e design team was thinking the same thing. As I was reading through the Pathfinder 2e core rulebook, I ran across rule after rule that had addressed something that had come up more than once in my D&D 5e games, but that the 5e rules hadn't accounted for. It was great to see that Paizo's design team and their playtesting had considered these things and resulted in rules to address them. Number 9, why not 1D&D? I imagine that some of you may be asking, but Luke, what if WOTC addresses a lot of these concerns in 1D&D? Why not switch to that instead? That's a fair question. First, if 1D&D is not going to be a new edition, which is what WOTC is continuing to maintain, even though most of us don't believe them, then the core rules will remain unchanged. There would only be slight tweaking, otherwise it would be a new edition, right? And the only way to fully address my concerns with 5e would frankly be to create a new edition probably. Also, I see no indications thus far that they have any intention of addressing anything I've mentioned thus far. In fact, I see WOTC trending in the opposite direction. So why should I wait a year or more to find out if 1D&D suits my fancy? Why not just switch to a new game system now that seems to be what I'm looking for? However, I have another big reason, which leads up to my next point. Number 10. I no longer wish to support Wizards of the Coast. I've been making videos for over 5 years now about D&D, with a focus on helping dungeon masters. I can only imagine how many game masters have benefited from the content my team and I produce. How many GMs may have quit if not for us? How many game masters went on to buy Wizards of the Coast products because of the help that we rendered them? And by the way, I've received emails and messages from lots of people saying exactly that the content my team and I produce has helped them and has encouraged them to not stop, not give up, and to continue being a game master. But anyway, not once has anyone from Wizards of the Coast reached out to me. Not once. But Paizo, on the other hand, has, and I don't even make videos specifically about Pathfinder. Then, you can well imagine my outrage at Wizards of the Coast when, after years of indirectly helping them, boistering their business, in December 2022, they tried to pull this OGL crap. It was a complete betrayal. I won't lie. I've been dissatisfied with Wizards of the Coast for some time. I feel like the quality of their products has steadily been declining, and many people feel the same way. Just look at their recent releases. They're leaning so heavily into monetizing their brand that it's quite off-putting, and they're outright lying to us about so many things. Do they really expect us to believe that one D&D isn't going to be a new edition? And this blatant lie about OGL version 1.1 just being a draft? Legally, it may have been a draft because everything's a draft until it's signed, but the spirit of what they were doing was that it was the final thing, and they know it. I have no compunctions about a company seeking to turn a profit. I do the same thing myself. But the unethical and underhanded manner that they go about it is quite simply wrong and inexcusable. So if this is the measure of the company, who they are and the products they create, then I think it's time for me to move on. Not only will I no longer support them by buying their products, but as an influencer in the space, I feel that I can no longer in good conscience continue to drive folks in their direction. So the first change I'm making is personally moving to Pathfinder 2nd Edition for some of my games. I'll continue to run D&D 5e for some of my games because frankly, there are lots of monsters from Kobold Press that I haven't used, and I'm excited to do so. And I know that lots of my players still like that game system. Again, there's nothing wrong with the game system. There's something wrong with the company that produces it. But there will be a trend toward new game systems, particularly Pathfinder 2nd Edition. As far as my videos go, I'll still make content for Game Masters. That won't change. I love Game Masters, and my heart will always be to help them as much as I can. However, and you may have already noticed this, we won't be calling them Dungeon Masters anymore. That's a D&D term that I'll be leaving behind. Now, I know that lots of people will continue to play D&D 5e, so I'll probably still create videos specifically for 5e. I don't think it would be right for me to stop doing that just because I don't support Wizards of the Coast. That would be akin to throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There are still lots of people that will continue to play 5e, and I want to give them resources to help them. Now, will I make content specifically for Pathfinder 2nd Edition and other game systems? Well, I don't know. We'll have to see where things take us. And if you're wondering about what this means for DM Lair publications, such as our Kickstarters and Lair magazine, here are my team's current plans. What we produce will continue to be compatible with D&D 5e. So if that's the game system you're running, you like it, and you will continue to use it, don't worry. We're still gonna give you resources to help you. That's not gonna change. As I said, lots of people will continue to play the system, and we want to provide resources for them. However, we're also going to start publishing Pathfinder 2nd Edition content. Right now, we're in that transition stage where my team is working on getting some of our resources translated over into Pathfinder 2nd Edition. We're learning the process, the system, and how it works as far as our company and business systems and processes go to be able to do that efficiently and effectively. Now, starting with some of March's content, which is already passed, we rolled out Pathfinder 2nd Edition content. And then in every month going forward, we're going to have unofficial releases that will have Pathfinder 2nd Edition content for you. And then once we get the system and process all ironed out and working smoothly, things will start coming out as official releases in these nice fancy PDFs that we put out when we do 5th edition content. So anyway, the too long didn't read is my team and I are going to start publishing both D&D 5th edition and Pathfinder 2nd edition, and it has already begun. So whichever system you're playing, we're gonna have stuff for you. That way, we can continue to serve folks who are running 5th edition, but also serve those who are moving on to Pathfinder 2nd edition. Now, whether you'll be playing D&D 5th edition, Pathfinder 2nd edition, or another system, there's a really cool old school way to run RPGs that emphasizes exploring the unknown and delving into mysterious locations, known as the hex crawl. However, hex crawls are often boring and boggy, which is why you should watch this video right here to learn how to run hex crawls so that they are fun and exciting for you and your players.